I'm outside now because I'm not around there at the house. So we're in John 20. It says the resurrection. Early on that Sunday morning, while it was still dark, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb and found the stone had been rolled away from the entrance. She ran and found Simon Peter and the other disciples, the one whom Jesus loved, and she said, "They have taken the Lord's body out of the tomb, and we don't know where they have put him." Peter and the other disciple started out for the tomb, and they were both running, but the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first, and he stooped down and looked in and saw the linen wrappings lying there, but he didn't go in. And then Simon Peter arrived and went inside, and he also noticed the linen wrappings lying there, while the cloth that had covered Jesus' head was folded up and lying apart from the other wrappings. Then the disciple who had reached the tomb first also went in, and he saw and believed. For until then, they still hadn't understood the scriptures that said Jesus must rise from the dead. Then they went home. Mary was standing outside the tomb crying as she wept, and she stooped and looked in. She saw two white-robed angels, one sitting at the head and the other at the foot of the place where the body of Jesus had been lying. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" the angels asked her. "Because they have taken away my Lord," she replied, "and I don't know where they have put him." She turned to leave and saw someone standing there. It was Jesus, but she didn't recognize him. "Dear woman, why are you crying?" Jesus asked her, "Who are you looking for?" She thought he was the gardener. "Sir," she said, "if you have taken him away, tell me where you have put him, and I will go and get him." "Mary," Jesus said. She turned at him and cried out, "Rabboni," which is Hebrew for teacher. "Don't cling to me," Jesus said, "for I haven't yet ascended to the Father. But go find my brothers and tell them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene found the disciples and told them, "I have seen the Lord." And then she gave them his message. So that Sunday evening, the disciples were meeting behind the locked doors because they were afraid of the Jewish leaders. Suddenly Jesus was standing there among them. "Peace be with you," he said. As he spoke, he showed them the wounds in his hands and in his side. They were filled with joy when they saw the Lord. Again he said, "Peace be with you. As the Father has sent me, so I am sending you." Then he breathed on them and said, "Receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive anyone's sins, they are forgiven. If you do not forgive them, they are not forgiven." One of the 12 disciples, Thomas, nicknamed the twin, was not of others. When Jesus came, they told him, "We have seen the Lord." But he replied, "I won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands, but my fingers into them, and place my finger in place." He said he won't believe it unless I see the nail wounds in his hands and put my fingers into them and place my hand into the wound in his side. 8 days later, the disciples were together again, and this time Thomas was with them. The doors were locked, but suddenly, as before, Jesus was standing among them. "Peace be with you," he said. Then he said to Thomas, "Put your fingers here and look at my hands, and put your hand into the wound in my side, and don't be faithless any longer. Believe." "My Lord and my God," Thomas exclaimed. Then Jesus told him, "You believe because you have seen me. Blessed are those who believe without seeing me." The disciples saw Jesus do many other miracle signs in addition to the ones recorded in this book. But these are written so that you may continue to believe that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of God, and that by believing in him you will have life by the power of his name. So is that a car? Yeah. So there are a few points about why Jesus told Thomas, "Blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe." Jesus was addressing Thomas's unbelief after initially doubting the other disciples' testimony that they had seen the risen Jesus. Thomas said he would not believe unless he saw Jesus and touched his wounds. When Jesus later appeared to the disciples again with Thomas present, he offered his wounded hands and side for Thomas to examine, but Jesus said, "Belief without demanding proof through the sentence is more blessed." Jesus was commenting his faith based on the reliable testimony and witness of others rather than direct sensory experience. Having faith without seeing is still valid faith. The gospel accounts of Jesus' resurrection were written for generations who would believe without seeing Jesus in the flesh. Their faith would also be blessed. Jesus was establishing that faith is possible even without demanding miracle signs or compelling divine intervention. Trusting God can be an act of obedience in the absence of proof. True faith goes beyond what can be proven rationally or inspiredly and involves trusting in God and what he has revealed through his word, the Bible, and others' testimony, not human reasoning alone. So in summary, Jesus was underscoring that faith built on the testimony of others can please God just as much as faith prompted by direct sight or sensation. Blessed are all who believe the gospel. So John chapter 20, verse 16, Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," I guess I'm saying that right, Rabboni, which means teacher. In John chapter 20, after Jesus' resurrection, Mary Magdalene encountered him at the tomb. This verse captures the beautiful moment when Jesus reveals himself to Mary Magdalene and calls her by name and recognizing his voice, and she responds with a deep affection and reverence, calling him Rabboni, which means teacher. The lesson here is that Jesus knows us intimately, and personally. He calls us by name and desires a personal relationship with each one of us. This verse reminds us that Jesus is not distant or impersonal deity, but a living and compassionate Savior who knows us by name. Practically, this encourages us to cultivate a personal relationship with Jesus, to listen for his voice and to respond to his call. It reminds us that we are seen, known, and loved by our teacher, and it deepens our trust and devotion to him. John chapter 20, verse 29, Jesus said to him, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen me and yet have believed." This verse occurs when Thomas, one of the disciples, doubts Jesus' resurrection until he sees him in his wounds. Jesus responds to Thomas, affirming that those who believe in him without physically seeing him are blessed. This verse highlights the significance of faith in Jesus Christ even in the absence of tangible evidence. It reminds us that faith is a precious gift that allows us to experience the blessings of God's salvation. It calls us to trust in Jesus Christ even when we cannot see him with our physical eyes. Practically, this verse encourages us to nurture and strengthen our faith. to believe in the unseen and trust in God's promises, and reminds us that the true blessedness comes from placing our faith in Jesus Christ and living in a life grounding in Him, even in the midst of uncertainties. So, in summary, John chapter 20 presents us with important verses and lessons. It reminds us that Jesus knows us intimately and calls us by name, inviting us into a personal relationship with Him, and encourages us to listen for His voice and respond to His call. Additionally, it phrases the significance of faith in Jesus Christ, even when we cannot physically see Him. It calls us to trust in Him and believe in His promises, knowing that true blessedness comes from placing our faith in Him ultimately. John 20 invites us to deepen our relationship with Jesus and live a life of faith, knowing that He is intimately involved in our lives and that our belief in Him brings blessings. So, as a topic of atheism, indeed an important one to address. While the Bible does not directly reference atheism as we understand it today, there's passages that speak to the existence of God and the importance of faith. Let us explore a couple of verses that can provide insight. Psalms 14 verse 1, the fool says in his heart there is no God. They are corrupt and they do abominable deeds, and there is none who does good. This verse is found in Psalms 14, which begins with a reflection on the folly of those who deny the existence of God. This verse highlights the perspective of the Psalms regarding those who deny the existence of God. It does not seek to demean or insult atheists, but rather faces the importance of acknowledging God's presence and authority. The lesson here is that faith in God is seen as wisdom, while denying His existence is considered foolishness. It reminds believers to be grounded in their faith and to recognize that a denial of God can lead to corruption in their moral actions. Practically, this verse encourages believers to engage in respectful dialogue with atheists, understanding that their worldview differs from our own. It also reminds us to be rooted in our faith and to confidently share the reasons for our belief in God's existence. Romans chapter 1 verse 20, for His invisible attributes, namely His eternal power and divine nature, have been clearly perceived ever since the creation of the world, and the things that they have been made, so they are without excuse. Paul discusses the revelation of God's existence for creation. This verse affirms that the existence of God can be received through the created world. It suggests that the evidence of God's eternal power and divine nature is apparent in the beauty and complexity of the natural world. The lesson here is that God's existence is not only evident through faith, but also through the observation of the creation of the world. This verse challenges us to reflect on the wonders of the natural world and to recognize the hand of the Creator behind it. It also suggests that those who deny the existence of God are without excuse, meaning that they have the potential to recognize God's existence, but choose not to. Practically, this verse encourages believers to appreciate and steward the natural world, recognizing its reflection of God's glory. It also reminds us to engage in thoughtful conversations with atheists, pointing out to the evidence of God's existence that can be found in creation. In summary, while the Bible does not directly address atheism, it does provide verses that reflect upon the importance of acknowledging God's existence and the evidence of His presence in creation. These verses remind believers to be rooted in their faith, engage in respectful dialogue, and appreciate the natural world as a testament to God's existence. It is important to approach discussing with atheists with humility, love, and a willingness to listen and understand their perspective, all while confidently presenting the reasons for our belief in God. So the birds are out. I'm gonna stop this because I have to walk soon.